Tony was checking out the broadcast. Are we having an issue? No?
I think we're okay.
We're waiting for my computer. For those of you out there in the internet land, every time we think we've got this figured out, it seems like something else happens. So hopefully tonight is working. If it's not coming in clearly, we post the liturgy every Sunday evening. So, happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
I really hope everyone has a sweet Valentine in their life like I do, that they can express their love to in this wonderful way. You know, up until a few decades ago, well before the greeting card companies and the floral shops and chocolate makers turned this into a day for flowers and candy and gushy cards, this day used to be called Saint Valentine's. And although there are three possible Saint Valentines who could legitimately claim this day was about them, the most likely one was a priest who was also a physician from the 3rd century. He was martyred on this day, February 14th, 269 AD in Rome, during the persecution of Christians decreed by the Emperor Claudius II Gothicus. Valentine ministered to others who were suffering because of this persecution. And after he was arrested, he cured the jailer's daughter, her name was Julia, of blindness. Later, he wrote her a letter expressing his deep affection for her and signed it, "Your Valentine." And that, my friends, was the first Valentine's Day card ever sent. And from then on, he's been venerated as the patron saint of people in love. St. Valentine and the other two St. Valentines as well all died as martyrs for the faith. He was executed for bringing healing to the sick and to the dying as a way to express his love for Christ. That's exactly what Jesus just did in our gospel. He brought healing to a leper. And as I said in my opening remarks, at the kind of the 50,000-foot level, this kind of sums up the story as St. Mark related it. He healed a leper. But the church in our wisdom provides us an opportunity to have some much deeper insight about just how significant, how remarkable this healing activity actually was. We hear in our first reading from the book of Leviticus about how the Mosaic law treated people with skin diseases. Our reading is from chapter 13, in which there are actually 46 verses that describe all manner of skin conditions, each with a specific procedure about what must do if one had such a condition. Our reading was actually chopped up. It's from verses 1 and 2, and then it skips to 44 and goes to 46. So all the stuff in the middle are all these other conditions we'll hear about. But in all the cases, you had to go immediately to the priest and show them the blemishes or the blotches or the sores, and they would render a diagnosis. And if you were deemed to be diseased, you were isolated from society, quarantined, if you will, cut off from your family and friends, and labeled unclean. In some cases, that isolation amounted to a total banishment from society. And if you came near other people, you had to announce in a loud voice, as we just heard, "Unclean, unclean," so they knew you were coming and they could get away. Now talk about social distance. These people, these sick people, were literally kicked out of society, often into caves, where they had to live like animals, exposed to the elements, and where they had to totally depend on the charity of others to bring them food. Seems awfully cruel by today's standards. But to the Jews at the time, and for that matter other ancient peoples as well, who often did the same kind of thing, they made perfect sense. Because of a total lack of knowledge about basic biology, they may not have known the cause of leprosy or what to do about it in a form of treatment or a cure for that matter, but they certainly understood contagion. This is how plagues begin. And so for them, expelling sick people from society was merely exercising an abundance of caution to protect the common good. By the way, it's that same misunderstanding of basic biology that causes some of the other more problematic biblical beliefs about human life. Not understanding how microbes create and spread disease led them to very understandable but horribly wrong conclusions about the sick. Not understanding the underlying biology of human reproduction led them to understandable but horribly wrong rules about sexual morality, the role of women, gender identity, and other things. But there was one other thing about this law that treated lepers and people like lepers as pariah, besides being a move to safeguard the population. As we heard in last week from the book of Job, the Jewish people had a very transactional understanding of their relationship with God. For them, God was a reward and punishment. If you did good things, you were blessed. And if you did bad things, you were cursed. The prosperous deserved their good health, and their affluence, and their power, and their other varieties of privilege. The people with social deficits, poverty, sickness, disability, lower class backgrounds, being in the wrong race or the wrong sex, they're responsible for their conditions. They brought it on themselves because of something they did. So why should I care? Okay. We hear a lot of that today. It's not my problem. They did it to themselves. Leprosy was a physical example of being cursed, being punished for something you obviously must have done. You obviously did something wrong. And so not only were you banished to protect society, but society was more than happy to jump on the bandwagon and help with your punishment. The marks and open sores on your body told everyone you must have sinned. And therefore the degree of mercy for you was minimal. After all, you did this to yourself. So with that as the backdrop, this gospel story becomes far more intriguing than it sounded like just read. Imagine what it took for that leper to leave his isolation, to dare to approach Jesus for help. Imagine the courage it took. Imagine the risk he was taking. After all, he was an outcast, an untouchable, a reject, a moral defective. He was garbage. And here he is, openly breaking the law. There was a very good chance that a crowd he might have come across along the way would have felt justified stoning him to drive him away. For that matter, he had no idea how Jesus would react, or any of Jesus' followers, the apostles. But like the demons in the last few Gospels, it was this unclean leper, this outcast, physically bearing the agony of his sin, who recognizes Jesus as the one who could miraculously save him. This leper made himself totally open, totally vulnerable to Jesus. Totally trusting that he is the one who was sent by him. No one else saw it. He saw it. The least likely to sin saw it. His faith was so strong, and his insight was so keen, and his need was so desperate, that he decided to put it all on the line and humbly kneel before the Lord. If you will, you can make me clean. That translation doesn't capture at all the impact of the original Greek. The actual word in Greek, translated as "you can make," is dynamite, from which we get the word dynamite. And the word for clean is kaparizu, from which we get the word caparize. So what the leper is actually saying is, Jesus, if you want, you can blow up my disease and thoroughly purify it. That's how deep his faith is. And there it is, our first lesson. We're all lepers in some way. We all have some degree of rot in us. If Jesus can only heal what we daringly and courageously bring to him in total faith. We need faith like this leper that is totally trusting in the power of Christ to save us. Only he can restore us to spiritual health. Only he can blow up our weaknesses and our offenses and replace them with holiness and faith. But we need to repent, come before him, and ask for his help. And then there's Jesus. Our translation said he was moved to pity. That's not what the Greek says. The Greeks, splanchinosomai. Yeah, that's a Greek word. Its meaning is, it ripped his guts out. It almost connotes anger. Not at the leper, but at the leprosy, and more so at the conditions this man was forced to live under by the law and by society. And so Jesus, who sees this and it rips his gut out to see it, openly and blatantly breaks the law too. And he reaches out, just as he did last week to Simon's mother. Immediately, instinctively, gratuitously, touches him. And the word for touched is apto, which is more appropriately translated, he gently caressed. And he was immediately made whole and did. And in so doing, Jesus deliberately made himself unclean. The first of many acts of civil disobedience committed by Jesus. As Pat Marin from the National Catholic Reporter said in the document I was reading, the article I was reading, when Jesus reached out to touch that leper, he was not only just breaking a taboo, he was dismantling the whole system based on the idea that creation was divided into the clean and unclean. Jesus affirmed God's compassion for everyone, including lepers, outcasts, and sinners. Love overrides every law or convention. The first commandment of love of God and neighbor is supreme. And there it is, our second lesson. This tells us all we need to know about the loving and compassionate nature of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. It rips his guts out to see us in pain, to see us in sin. And when we come to him asking for his healing, we will feel the caress of a gentle God and immediately be made whole. And then our gospel ends with Jesus telling the former leper to go to the priest and do what you must to make it official. And like he did with the demons, he orders him, keep it a secret. Jesus wants the so-called clean people to see him for who he is on their own. But like the demons, the man can't keep it in. He tells everybody. And understandably so, he must have been deliriously happy. And therein is our final lesson. How do we treat the lepers in our own lives? To repeat, the first commandment of love of God and of neighbor is supreme. Who in our lives is waiting to be made deliriously happy? Who needs to be embraced by you with the love of Christ? Is it possible that your leper is someone close to you, perhaps even a member of your immediate family, close friend, colleague? Most of us can encounter lepers just by walking down the street. How many of them do you know? Or that you encounter that need help? When a homeless guy or gal approaches, you appreciate that he or she has probably had to muster up the same kind of courage that this leper just did in this story today. There are no shortage of lepers around us. We have the choice to be like the priest of the temple, or to be like Christ. I think I know on which side we find St. Valentine. Happy Valentine's.